And on behalf of the GHSA Executive Board and the GHSA staff, I want to officially welcome you to the first in-person traffic safety conference since before the pandemic. It really is good to see everybody back in person, to reconnect with folks that we haven't seen in person other than on a Zoom call over the past year. So before we get started, I want to please ask everyone to rise for the presentation of the colors by the Colorado State Patrol Honor Guard. I was going to introduce you. If you don't mind. Thank you. Please now join me in welcoming Trooper Kelby Siegfried to sing the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you, Trooper. You can be seated. So 2 days ago, Saturday, was the 20th anniversary of the tragic attacks on our country of September 11th. As I stated before, I'm from the state of New York. I had an office down in New York City, about 5 blocks from World Trade Center. We all remember where we were, what we were doing on that tragic and fateful day. In honor of the thousands of people killed and injured in the attacks, as well as the thousands of law enforcement, firefighters, first responders, and others who have suffered as subsequent casualties, please join me in a moment of silence to reflect on their bravery and sacrifice.
Thank you. Thank you, Colorado State Patrol Honor Guard. Okay, before we move forward, I want to make sure that everyone has access to our latest information about the conference during the annual meeting. If you haven't downloaded the app to your phone yet, please visit iTunes, App Store, or Google Play and search for the GHSA annual meeting app on the phone. It's very helpful to give you information about sessions, gives you activity alerts, and allows you to connect with each other. And I want to especially thank Volvo for sponsoring the app. I hope you got a chance to stroll through the exhibit hall this morning and yesterday afternoon and evening at the opening reception. I want to extend a special thanks to Intoxilock for sponsoring last night's reception, and you can visit intoxilock.com for more information. So I'm pleased to report that as of a few weeks ago, we didn't know how many people would show up to this, so thank you for coming. We're glad to report that we have over 500 attendees for this year's annual meeting. I'd also like to point out this session is being webcast live for those who couldn't be here in person, and I'm honored to welcome those who are with us on the online audience. For those of you here in Denver, as you attend the workshops beginning this morning and over the next few days, we expect many of them to be at capacity due to our social distancing efforts. If you cannot get into a session, please try another one. All the workshops are designed to provide you with the tools and knowledge that you can implement in your state, in your community. I also remind you of the current public health precautions and rules for our annual meeting. The GHSA Executive Board made the difficult decision a few weeks ago to require face masks unless speaking in a workshop or a general session or while eating and drinking. And as I look out into the room, I really want to thank everybody for complying with that so we didn't have to run around being the mask police this week. If you need to remove your mask or get some air, please feel free to step outside and do so. Masks and hand sanitizer are freely available for all that need it. The hotel has gone above and beyond to help us with cleaning protocols. We have organized conference activities to allow for increased distance. Our evening events, some are outside, so you don't have to wear a mask. So please continue to comply with those requirements. Thank you. So during the past 12 months, we've all experienced tremendous challenges, but there have also been some remarkable accomplishments. We have continued our close partnership with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the US DOT during the transition to the new administration. We have continued and expanded our partnerships with private sector organizations, enabling GHSA to award highway safety grants to many states to address impaired driving, teen speeding, and other persistent traffic safety issues. In a time of elevated scrutiny of traffic enforcement, we have also taken purposeful steps to simultaneously defend the critical role of law enforcement in traffic safety, but also to point out how we can address concerns of inequity with the new ideas and tools that will elevate all of our efforts even further. On that note, I want to ask all law enforcement to raise your hand if you're in the audience, please. So we have a fairly significant audience. Please rise and be recognized, law enforcement, if you don't mind. We appreciate all you do to protect and serve our great country. And I'd also like to, since I have the podium, I'd like to recognize our New York contingent, if they would just rise and be recognized for the folks from New York, so I even know where you are. There they are in the back row. There. Thank you very much. We in New York appreciate all that you do to keep us safe. We look forward to working closely with you and all of our partners to ensure the safety of all road users. The meeting theme this year is Moving Mountains, forging a new traffic safety landscape. In the past year, I know we have all felt that the ground has been shifted under our feet. At the same time, we have seen a dramatic increase in traffic fatalities. 38,680 people died tragically in 2020 in motor vehicle traffic crashes when we all thought that they would go down with a reduction in vehicle miles traveled. That's the largest projected number of fatalities since 2007. Two areas of critical concern for GHSA are speeding and pedestrian safety. The association, with the help of state highway safety offices, documented the significance of the pedestrian safety crisis in our annual spotlight report and a subsequent addendum released earlier this year. We're also helping to bring attention to the neglected highway safety issue of speeding by partnering with the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety and the National Road Safety Foundation to fund speed management pilot programs in 2 states. These are new mountains that have risen up ahead of us, but with our partnership, our collaboration and leadership, I know we can work together to reshape this landscape. We have a number of sessions over the coming days to deal with this challenging landscape. I hope you will join us as we explore what we have learned in the past year and how we should plan for the future. When it comes to our ongoing highway safety challenges, what new tools and best practices are available to all of us? This afternoon, we will have a general session on how we can prepare our first responder community for the widespread deployment of automated vehicles. On Wednesday, we will have a general session of the persistent challenge of speeding. There are also a number of sessions focused on law enforcement. What is the state highway safety criminal justice? How can we improve high visibility enforcement? How can we better support our law enforcement partners? And how we can better engage with our diverse communities. Tomorrow morning, we will have a general session dedicated to advancing equity and engagement in highway safety. In addition, there will be workshops on other factors contributing to the surge in traffic fatalities. We have gathered all of our partners here under one roof, and over the next few days, we will explore where we can and where we must go from here. So I'm excited to be with all of you in Denver, and I really do appreciate the hard work that was done by the planning committee to make GHSA 2021 a success. I want to thank our hosts, the Colorado State Office of Highway Safety. Carol, please stand, and Glenn, if you don't mind. Thank you for all that you did, and thank you for your staff who's here working as well. Over the next few days, you will see staff from Colorado DOT manning the registration booth, monitoring workshop rooms, and checking name badges. They're also standing by to answer any questions you have and to make the most of your trip to Denver. Every day, they'll be wearing matching polo shirts, and I believe today's color is red. Correct, red. So to officially welcome us to the Sentinel State, I am pleased to introduce a video message from the Governor of Colorado, Jared Polis.
Good morning. I'm honored to welcome the Governor's Highway Safety Association's 2021 annual meeting to Colorado. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person today, but I'm excited to be with you virtually as you begin this week's events. Colorado is a diverse state. We have mountains and plains and deserts and big cities and rural areas. A diverse state that has a variety of highway and road safety needs and requirements. And that's why I've made highway safety a leading focus of my administration and for the Colorado Department of Transportation and their Executive Director, Shoshana Liu. Across our state, there's designs to protect pedestrians and bicyclists in dense communities, prevent speeding in rural roadways and collisions with animals, and provide crossings. And speaking of safety, we're the state that pioneered the management of cannabis impaired driving as well to manage safety. I hope you're going to have a meaningful conversation about the best activities we can do to keep drivers safe. It's my pleasure to recognize the meeting attendees who are current and former law enforcement. Thank you for everything you do to protect our communities. In Colorado, we've taken important steps to improve our public safety and reduce crime. I'm confident we can find a way to restore trust between law enforcement and communities they serve and keep all road users safe. I also want to thank GHSA for the steps the organization is taking to keep all of you who are attending this meeting safe. Whether it's masks and social distancing and other health precautions, they're all a critical part of preventing the spread of coronavirus. I also want to thank GHSA and all of you for helping us safely keep Colorado open for business. Enjoy your stay in Denver. I hope you have an opportunity to experience all that our city and state have to offer. Have a great meeting. Welcome to our state, and thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Governor. Okay, with that, I want to introduce our first speaker, Colonel Matthew Packard. Colonel Matthew Packard has more than 2 decades of experience with the Colorado State Patrol. He began his career in crash reconstruction, and today he is the patrol's 9th chief, providing leadership to more than 1,200 troopers. Please join me in the welcoming of Colonel Matthew Packard.
Good morning. Thank you all very much for being here, and thank you for the introduction, the opportunity to address you at the beginning of your conference. I'll echo the governor. Welcome to Colorado. We are very glad you're here and hope you have the opportunity to enjoy our great state and at least the Denver metro area. I typically, in these types of speaking opportunities, I say you picked a great time to be in Colorado. And then I started to realize I say that pretty much every month of the year, because it's a great place to be. And you picked a great week with weather, a little bit of a cold front coming to cool it off. But I trust that you'll have the opportunity to be outside a little bit and enjoy all that Colorado has to offer. We are very proud of our highway safety, our traffic safety efforts that are here. And I'd like to take a couple of minutes this morning to talk about some of the things that we're focusing on, specifically with the Colorado State Patrol, and of course in partnership with CDOT and our other law enforcement partners throughout the state. Like everywhere else, we experienced a significant increase in traffic fatalities last year, particularly alarming when you saw the reduction in vehicle miles traveled. And this is not something that we took lying down. We are very much invested in ensuring that all people traveling through Colorado have the opportunity to do so safely and enjoy all that our state has to offer. As is everybody else, we continue to focus efforts on impaired driving. Continues to be about 30% of our traffic fatalities are a result of an impaired driver, and of course distracted driving. But these are things that we think continue to be in the constant narrative of highway safety. While we still have work to do, and enforcement efforts will continue to be effective here, we really wanted to drill down into different areas to provide a different lens specifically into traffic safety. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes this morning to talk about that. First, I'd like to talk about our efforts specifically around move over enforcement or reducing struck by incidents. This is something that is very personal to me and very much to the members of the Colorado State Patrol. In fact, there are a few members here today in the audience who have a primary focus in their job to reduce struck by incidents for our members and our law enforcement partners, as well as CDOT and other first responders. We had a tragedy in our organization where we lost 5 troopers over a short period of time that were struck by passing motorists as they're out there doing the job serving the people of Colorado, trying to make things safer. We learned very quickly that when we enforce the move over law, when we talk about it, we are less likely to be hit. So we imparted on a very focused effort in 2021 to do just those things. Move over enforcement for a Colorado State Trooper is not a discretionary enforcement option. If someone violates the move over law, they can expect to receive a citation from the State Trooper. We know that because enforcement works. Enforcement is an effective tool in encouraging safe driving behavior. However, enforcement is not the only solution to that problem. We need to do effective outreach and marketing and communication and education. And that we took a heavy load in that regard as well, using our social media platforms, partnering with other traffic related entities like CDOT. E470 is a major toll authority here in Colorado that was willing to work with us as well, but really bringing focus and attention to the need to move over. Just yesterday, I was driving on one of our interstates in the southern part of the metro area. Saw a trooper doing what troopers do, assisting a pedestrian on the inside shoulder of I-25. It's a whole nother conversation. But what I was pleased to see is a lot of responsiveness from the motorists that were approaching as our trooper was doing the work on the side of the road, slowing and moving over. So this will be something that we continue to focus on in years to come. But if I may, learn from our success here. In the wake of tragedy, we saw a strong correlation again in our lack of enforcement or a lack of outreach resulted in further troopers and other folks getting hit. We have work to do. 1 week ago today, we had one of our cars in the north side of the metro area that was hit while a trooper was out on a traffic stop. Thankfully, our trooper was outside of his vehicle when it was struck by a passing motorist who admitted to do it once we tracked him down and just said, I wasn't paying attention. Unfortunately, the very next day, 2 flaggers that were working on a construction project in the area were hit by another hit and run driver. Tragically, one of those flaggers was killed and the other was seriously injured. We have work to do. And it is frankly empowering to be in a room like this filled with so many like-minded folks that are invested in increasing safety and finding new and innovative ways while leveraging our existing and successful ways to make Colorado roads safer. Second area of focus I'd like to talk about is one that we don't spend a lot of time talking about in rooms like this. And it has a correlation to the third one I'll spend a little bit of time talking about as well, but it's street racing. It's one of the things that we've been dealing with, probably I would say a mid-level issue for us over the last several years, but really in the wake of the pandemic, street racing became even a heightened focus. I suspect with fewer vehicles on the roads, that people were more empowered to go do and engage in this type of behavior. But in the Denver metro area, much like a lot of the metropolitan areas around the country, we saw an increase in gathering of folks that were willing to effectively close the interstates, close major roads on their own, and engage in this dangerous behavior. We worked very hardly with our partners to do enforcement operations again. In fact, throughout the year, we had a couple of different task force or team operations, if you will, where we partnered with 16 other metro area law enforcement organizations to do a focused enforcement effort specifically on street racing, using all of our assets that we had. Plainclothes officers that were involved in this, certainly heightened enforcement operations and even aviation tools to track these folks as they're out there engaging in this reckless behavior. There is no doubt street racing is a deadly hobby that people are taking on, and it will continue to be a focus of enforcement for the men and women of the Colorado State Patrol. I'm excited to tell you that we did have strong enforcement numbers. We're figuring out new ways to interdict this type of activity, and know that these efforts will result again in safer numbers or safer roads for the folks that are traveling here in Colorado. And finally, one that has been talked about already this morning, and I know, in fact, I'll be back on Wednesday morning to spend some time talking about this as well, but the excessive speed issue that we're dealing with across the country. Just in fact, on Saturday morning, I had the opportunity to be on the call with my counterparts from across the country, talking about traffic safety issues that we have, and of course, excessive speed and those drivers traveling at over 100 miles an hour continue to plague this country's roadways from coast to coast. And it's something that we will continue to have strict enforcement on. But again, as I've talked about, enforcement's effective, but it's not enough. We don't have enough troopers to be in all the right places at the right time, and we need to find new ways to engage the public, empower the public to speak out and encourage those that they know, their family members, their friends, their communities, to engage in safe driving. In 2020, far and away, excessive speed was the leading causal factor for fatal and injury crashes investigated by men and women of the State Patrol. This is not so, as it's so commonly referred to, as a revenue issue or a way that we can just write tickets. That's not what we're about. Speed is killing people. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, and we need to do everything we can to curb this behavior. It is absolutely a safety and a quality of life issue. So again, we will continue to do our speed enforcement operations, but we will find new ways to partner with the community, partner with CDOT from an engineering perspective to do outreach. We had a big successful campaign this year we called Slow Your Roll, but really highlighting not just the fact that speeding is dangerous, but explaining to folks why speeding is dangerous. I've been a part of a lot of conversations over the last several months trying to understand why traffic safety took the decline that it did in 2020. And while that's an important conversation, I really feel it's important for us, particularly in law enforcement, we need to spend some time dealing with the problem that is in front of us today. We can talk about why it's happening, but the problem isn't going to stop while we're trying to figure that out. We need to engage and take real action and be thoughtful about how we take that action to slow people down so that we can increase the safety on our roads. We have a lot of work to do, there is no doubt, but I'm proud to tell you that we have a positive trend in 2021 when compared to 2020. 2020 was a rough year, the first year in several years in Colorado where we saw that number climb back over 600 and the number of lives lost on our state's roadways. And we're trending back in the right direction in 2021. And that's in large part because of the efforts of not only the men and women of the State Patrol, our law enforcement partners, but people like you that are engaged and passionate about traffic safety and how important that is to the quality of life of the people that live in Colorado and across this country. So again, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you very much for your commitment to making our country's roads safer. Please take advantage of all that you have to offer here. There are several members of the State Patrol that are here. If you need anything from us, just grab our attention. We'd be happy to help you, point you in the right direction, get you to where you need to be, answer whatever questions you might have. But more than anything, spend some time talking to each other. I think the biggest value in a conference like this is the opportunity to hear different ideas, a different perspective on issues that we're all dealing with. And you have the opportunity for the first time in several months, at least, to be in the same room with folks on these breaks where you can have a cup of coffee, stay socially distant, of course, but really have those thoughtful conversations. My experience, it's on those breaks where you can talk about the topics that came up on the breakout sessions, where the real knowledge and the real growth occurs. So thank you for your passion. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for being here in Denver and in Colorado. I hope you have a wonderful conference, and we look forward to seeing what comes of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colonel. And thank you for your comments on speed. As you were talking, it reminded me in New York, prior to 2020, the number of citations over 100 miles an hour was 3%. And during the pandemic, it was 19%. People driving over 100 miles an hour. So it's a critical problem in all of our states. So thank you for your comments on that. Thank you for the warm welcome to the conference. And maybe 2022 will be the year that Congress and NHTSA gives us money for a speed program. So anyway, now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for the GHSA conference. It's a true pleasure to introduce to you Jennifer Homendy, Chair of the National Transportation Safety Board and friend of GHSA. Chair Homendy joined the NTSB in 2018 after serving 14 years as the Democratic Staff Director for the United States House of Representatives Transportation Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials. Your business card must have been huge. The U.S. Senate confirmed her as the 15th chair of the NTSB just last month. Chair Homendy previously held positions with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO, and the American Iron and Steel Institute. Please join me in giving a warm GHSA welcome to NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy.
Thanks, Chuck, and thanks to Jonathan Atkins and Russ Martin for inviting me to speak today at this great event. And thanks to each of you for your continued focus on improving safety, and a special thanks to law enforcement for all that you do for safety, for our nation, for your states, and for all our families. I know it's been tough, but we need you and appreciate all that you do. Your partnership with the NTSB on critical investigations is key, so I just want to thank you for that. So who's excited to be at a conference in person? It's very nice to not be on Zoom for once, and I appreciate all those who are watching online, but I really do not want to see my computer anymore. So appreciate seeing you all. The theme for this conference is Moving Mountains, Forging a New Traffic Safety Landscape that speaks to doing big things. Each of us have set high goals individually in our personal and professional lives, and we've faced big challenges, certainly in the last couple of years, but we're aiming to save lives, the biggest mark that a person can make. And while I'm speaking, I want you to think about big goals you've made and challenges you've faced and how you overcame them. Because I'm going to ask you to think about some words that got you through those challenges. As a nation, we've always set big goals, and we faced tremendous challenges. In fact, sometimes we thought that they were insurmountable, but we overcame them. It was 59 years ago yesterday, on September 12, 1962, that President John F. Kennedy delivered one of the most iconic speeches of his presidency to a large crowd gathered at Rice Stadium in Houston, Texas, known as "We Choose to Go to the Moon." A year earlier, the president began a dramatic expansion of the space program and committed the nation to the ambitious goal of landing a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And it was his job to convince Congress, the American people, and his colleagues. He had a lot of support, but he also had a lot of critics. Some thought it was impossible. Others thought it was a big waste of money with very few gains. But Kennedy didn't waver. In that moonshot speech, he acknowledged that there would be high costs and hardships, but promised high rewards. He criticized those who wanted to wait, saying our country was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. He quoted British explorer George Mallory, who died on Mount Everest. When Mallory was asked why he wanted to climb it, he said, because it's there. And he quoted William Bradford, who was governor of Plymouth in 1630, and I love this quote. All great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage. I want to repeat that. All great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage. And then came the most famous line in his speech. We choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. Change a few words there. We choose to save lives, not because it is easy, but because it is hard and because we care. We choose zero, not because it is easy, but because it is hard and we care. And we choose to fight like hell for all those who've lost loved ones in terrible, terrible, 100% preventable tragedies, not because it's easy, but because it's hard and we care. Kennedy didn't hide his goal. We were going to do big things. We were going to move mountains. And in less than 7 years from that speech, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And this past July, we all watched as Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos and their passengers traveled to space, or at least on the edge of space. So whether we're talking about space, the first flight across the Atlantic, the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, or reaching for zero, we can do big things. You can do big things. Together, we can move mountains to forge new landscapes. We can overcome great difficulties with answerable courage. I asked each of you to think about some challenges that you've overcome personally and professionally. So I'm asking what words come to mind when you think about what it takes to overcome some challenges. And I'm going to give you a second to think about it. Maybe 1, 2, hopefully 3 can go to those mics or yell something out, one word. Because I'm going to share mine. Mine's perseverance. I love running. In 2014, I was burnt out from running. I did the Grand Canyon from the North Rim to the South Rim, did a bunch of races, and I needed something new. So I took up triathlon. I'm a great swimmer. I'm a terrible biker. It is true. I'm not great clipped into that bike. I had fallen several times getting used to the clips, and on one Saturday, I was going downhill on a training ride. I was training for a half Ironman in North Carolina, and I didn't see a problem with the road ahead, and I hit a part of the road and went flying and was severely injured. At the time, I didn't know it. I popped up, there was some damage to my bike, called my husband, went home. I thought it was fine. 2 days later, I was in a hazmat training class at a fire academy in Fairfax, Virginia, and my whole right leg was swollen, and I couldn't understand what was going on. I just kept stretching at breaks. And all of a sudden, at the end of the class, I heard click, and my back went out. And it felt like if I leaned back, I would just fall. And so I went straight to the ER. Nobody could give me answers. And for 2 years, I was in terrible, terrible pain. It was the worst time of my life. And, you know, all I did was look for answers. I avoided every painkiller. I just wanted to know what was happening. I eventually found a great doctor, and I ended up getting platelet-rich plasma therapy, which doesn't always work for people. It's somewhat experimental, and worked really hard for months to get back to what I loved. It was tough. I went from running 13 miles, swimming 2 miles, biking 57 to walking with a cane. And so for me, it was a tough road back, but now I'm training for the same half Ironman that I trained for 7 years ago. And so it's not quite getting to the moon in 7 years, it's better. And it's my personal mountain to move. So for me, my word is perseverance. So what's yours? Resiliency, that's a good word. Courage. Sacrifice. Tenacity. All great words. Perseverance, courage, sacrifice, tenacity. Those are the words. And these are the partnerships we have to rely on to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries on our roads. Perseverance, resiliency, courage, sacrifice, tenacity, and so many more. So let's talk about what's happening on our roads right now. As some of you know, I was sworn in as chair of the NTSB on August 13th. The NTSB investigates all domestic aviation crashes in the US and significant events in other modes of transportation. On my first day, I again reviewed the numbers. Last year, there were 756 fatalities on our nation's railroads, including 198 at grade crossings, which actually represented a 33% decrease in fatalities from 2019 levels. 0 deaths and 0 crashes on major airlines. About 700 in marine, which is mainly recreational boating, 15 in pipelines, and 38,680 lives lost on our nation's roads. 38,680. That's the highest number of fatalities since 2007. Alcohol-involved crashes up 9%. Speeding-related crashes went up 11%. In my home state of Virginia, state troopers posted images on social media of tickets for someone doing 102 miles per hour in a 70, and another showing 115 miles per hour in a 35. Occupant ejections in vehicles up 20%. Pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities remained about the same, but motorcyclist fatalities up 9%. And we know now that the trend continues nationally in 2021. NHTSA estimates that 8,730 people died in motor vehicle traffic crashes in the first 3 months of 2021, a 10.5% increase from the first quarter of 2020. And just like 2020, vehicle miles traveled declined. So fewer vehicle miles traveled isn't the solution. In this case, reduced volume was part of the problem. The carnage on our roads has to stop. You know it, and I know it. What these numbers represent is the reason I do my job, and the reason that it's so important that you're doing yours. Each of these numbers represents a life cut short. A mother or father, suddenly permanently gone, brothers and sisters, kids, not at the dinner table, graduations, weddings, and birthdays never celebrated. But that's why we need to do one more very big thing: 0 traffic deaths. How many people think 0 is attainable? Be honest. Some people don't. I'm here to tell you it is. In 1982, there was a plane crash that I vividly remember. It was snowing hard in the DC area. Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the river after takeoff. It hit 7 occupied vehicles on the bridge before plunging through the ice into the Potomac River. 79 people were on board, only 5 were rescued. 4 motorists on the bridge also died, and I'll never forget watching it all unfold. On the same day, we also were investigating a metro transit derailment that killed 3, injured 25 others, and stranded thousands for hours. Just a couple hours later. We saw decades of airline crashes one after another, and then the federal government, the aviation industry, and labor did a big thing and moved a mountain. They changed how they approach safety, transitioning from a reactive approach to one that is far more proactive, bringing together all stakeholders, constantly evaluating and reevaluating risk based on data and non-punitive reporting, and developing solutions to address that risk. Now we're at almost 0. In fact, we went nearly a decade after the tragic Colgan Air accident in 2009 with 0 fatal accidents in regularly scheduled commercial passenger aviation. 0. When Kennedy was president, 43 occurred that year, hundreds of fatalities. So what was the challenge in aviation? When the aviation industry and the federal government began their efforts to forge a new landscape, the fatality rate in aviation had reached a plateau, very much like the highway fatality number. Many people thought that the rate couldn't decline any further, just as some believe we will never drive highway fatalities down to 0. But twice as many passengers were predicted to fly within 20 years, and nobody wanted a spike in the number of highly visible crashes. So the federal government, industry, and labor committed to reducing the rate 80% within 10 years. 80% within 10 years. And they made it. Then they kept going. Now, nearly year after year, there are 0 major passenger airline crashes. 0. Together, we can accomplish that on our roads. But first, we have to fundamentally rethink how we approach road safety. Long ago, Albert Einstein said, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results." The current approach, which favors automobiles and punishes only drivers for crashes, is clearly not working. If we're going to get to 0, we will have to do something different. So today I'm calling on all transportation leaders, from roadway designers to public health officials up to the governor, from vehicle manufacturers to transportation providers, from entire communities to safety advocates, to embrace a new way, a new approach, a new vision for traffic safety, the Safe System approach, which currently is on the NTSB's most wanted list for transportation safety improvements. I'm in the process of holding a series of webinars focused on the Safe System approach. The past 4 are on the NTSB's YouTube channel and my Twitter account. We held one Thursday on safe vehicles, so I hope you check them out. But the Safe System approach, if you're not familiar with it, is a shift in the way we think about traffic safety. We've spent decades planning, designing, building, and operating our road system for the efficient movement of people and goods rather than safety. And we've spent decades developing countermeasures and behavioral interventions that are targeted at individuals rather than the entire system. So let's take speeding. Does the responsibility for speeding rest solely on the driver's poor choice, or does the system as a whole play a role in incentivizing that driver to speed? Did the road design encourage high speeds? How about ill-conceived federal guidance that leads to ever-increasing speed limits in states? And if you're from federal highways or DOT and you're watching, get rid of the 85th percentile approach. How about states which fail to give local authorities the ability to set lower speed limits Vehicle manufacturers who design vehicles that can exceed 100 miles per hour or that have no speed governors when we know in Europe that's standard. The safe system approach considers all of that and more. The principles underlying the safe system acknowledge that humans will make mistakes that lead to traffic crashes. We always will. We will make mistakes. But no one should lose their life or be seriously injured as a result of a crash. The human body has a limited physical ability to tolerate crash forces. 3, all parts of the system must be strengthened so that if one part fails, road users are still protected. With more than 200 million drivers on the road, somebody will make a mistake. That's guaranteed. All of us will. But that mistake doesn't need to end in tragedy. Other parts of the system, safe vehicles, safe roads, safe speeds, and post-crash care can still prevent the worst outcomes. Does that mean we still have to apprehend speeders and stop impaired drivers, or better yet, prevent them from driving impaired? Of course. Just and fair enforcement cannot stop, or more lives will be lost. Let me repeat that. We still need enforcement of our traffic laws. That cannot stop. And finally, road safety is a shared responsibility, and it will take bringing everybody to the table to identify the best solutions, ones we haven't even considered. That means planners, designers, engineers, law enforcement, policymakers, public health officials, educators, vehicle manufacturers, insurers, rail and transit providers can't be forgotten. Car seat manufacturers, fleet managers, road users, the media, entire communities that normally in the past don't have a seat, having been given a seat at the table, and many more. And that has to include our biggest critics. It's only through an all-inclusive effort that we'll be able to achieve zero. In short, we need to break down these silos and make sure everyone is at the table and working together to identify the best solutions. That's what aviation did. We can too. I want to go back to that quote in Kennedy's speech. All great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage. With your passion, strength, courage, and commitment, and with all of us coming together to work collaboratively through a safe system approach, we can do something different in road safety. We can do something big in road safety. Together, we can move mountains and we can forge a new traffic safety landscape. And together, we can get to 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries. Thank you very much. Enjoy a fantastic conference.
There's microphones in the audience. We'll take questions now if you have any questions, or we can hold them till later, but feel free to stand up and ask a question now if you'd like. Here comes someone.
I can't promise I have all the answers, but I had 4 shots of espresso and I'm doing good. Go.
Okay, I've got an easy one for you, Chair. And thank you so much for your leadership and for your passion and your commitment. I think that's really something I think everybody in this room is really excited to hear. Can you tell us a little bit about how your experience working on the Hill has helped you with your current position? And then I'm going to throw part 2 in that. Do you see a larger role for NTSB working with the state highway safety offices to accomplish some of the very things that you just mentioned? And thank you.
Yeah, thank you for both those questions. First, I do see a great opportunity for the NTSB to partner with state highway traffic safety offices and states in general to drive down traffic deaths. And I hope we can work together We rely on our partnerships with you and of course with law enforcement and others when there are tragedies that occur on your roads in your states, and we need you. And so I'm hoping we can work together. I consider me a partner. I consider you a partner. That's the only way we're going to be able to move forward. And on the question was my experience on the Hill and how that helps at NTSB. It helps tremendously. There's a lot, when I'm at a crash or any other type of significant event, there's a lot of misunderstanding on what I do or our board members do. A lot of people think we're the investigators, and the press always talks about, here's the lead investigator for this crash. And we're not. We are the spokesman. We are trying to take all the pressure off of our investigator in charge and our other investigators so they can do their jobs while we provide important information to families, government officials, and the media, and most importantly to the public. So my work on the Hill prepared me for that, and most importantly, it prepared me to try to help NTSB move forward, to build on the successes of our past, and to move forward into the future, because we have a lot of tremendous challenges facing us. We have new technologies on our highways. My good friend Nat will talk soon. We have new technologies in our airspace. And so I want to make sure that the NTSB has resources to do that. But also there are a lot of things you all want to do that require different changes on the Hill. They happen to match with a lot of our recommendations. And so, I hope we can partner moving some of those things forward in reauthorization and beyond.
Thank you for your remarks, Chair Homendy, this morning. And I just have a question, I think, similar vein to the previous one. And I think drawing on your experience from Capitol Hill, I think a lot of times when NTSB issues recommendations to agencies like the Department of Transportation, they believe that it's criticizing their work and don't necessarily look at it as opportunities. And just wonder if you have any thoughts on how agencies at DOT like NHTSA, Federal Highway, and those that work with highway safety in general can really embrace the recommendations and use those as ways to work with Congress to get more resources to be able to accomplish our shared goals of reducing fatalities.
That's a great question. The NTSB's mission, and part of our mission is not to put blame on anyone for a particular crash. Our mission is to determine what happened and to prevent it from happening again. So when we conduct an investigation, we're looking at a host of issues, and we're issuing at the end of that investigation the factual information around the investigation, the analysis, findings, and recommendations. And a lot of times we do hear, well, you're picking on us for not doing something, but we're really trying to raise a serious safety deficiency that needs to be addressed. It is not criticism, it's what will prevent the next tragedy from happening and what will save the next life. And a lot of times our recommendations are to the Department of Transportation and to the individual modes. And, I think our role is to say what's right. The regulators take what we say and they determine, what they want to do to address our recommendations. We encourage them, we work with them, we meet with them quarterly. I've had great discussions with DOT since the new administration came on, and certainly since I became chair. So I'm pretty hopeful that we can work together, because I think working together is the only way to move those recommendations forward to make sure that they're implemented.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You are truly a breath of fresh air. For such a time as this, there are people placed in positions to make a difference. As you talked about Kennedy, I believe the voice of NTSB is also a very, very strong voice in this country. And to be able to get the message out that you just got out is going to be an incredible message. I guess my question is, how do you anticipate getting this message out in such a forceful way that you presented it to us today, that folks will be willing, because when you did the quote, you said, we chose to. So these agencies and everyone the organizations that are dealing with highway safety have to make a choice. They have to make a choice. How do you imagine being able to do that? And I'm sure here to support you in any way I can to help you, but how do you see NTSB and getting your voice heard across the nation?
Well, fortunately for those in the audience who know me, I have a very loud voice.
Excellent.
Literally, all my friends are like, yeah. So, no, seriously, I am very active and want to be about 10 times more active than I can be on a regular basis. I mean, the NTSB isn't just me, the chair. We have 4 other board members and 400 amazing employees that are dedicated to safety every single day. And we're going to be extremely active on all of these issues, including highway safety. I mean, this is a big deal. We have a public health crisis on our hands. 40,000 people dying a year. You know, I did a speech for an employer, a group of employers, and on it, I put a PowerPoint slide that mirrored the CNN scene that we see every day with the COVID numbers, except I use traffic safety numbers. And I just wonder, if people had to see that every single day, would it make a difference? I don't know the answer to that question. But what I will say is we have to be loud. We have to talk about these things, and we have to be aggressive. I mean, that's why I mentioned it is so important to have people, to reach out to people who are not normally at our table, who are not normally at these conferences, entire communities who aren't. People who don't appreciate or have our same views on traffic safety. I testified in Connecticut, I testified in Connecticut on helmet laws a few years ago. And I'm from Connecticut. And when I testified, there was a group there, ABATE at the time, and they were protesting the hearing. And, you know, I sat there and I was on one side of the room before the hearing and they were on one side of the room before the hearing. And this is ridiculous. So, you know, these are people with views. They're important to be heard. So I walked over and I introduced myself and it opened up a dialogue. Now, they didn't agree with me. I didn't agree with them, but that's okay. We don't have to always agree with each other, but we have to talk. We have to continue talking or we're not going to find the best solutions. So, you know, all I can continue doing is conveying the message. And we will, and I'm loud. Normally I run on 8 shots of espresso. This is only half of me. Can you imagine when it's 8? Oh my God.
Thank you. So I want to just say, I'm Stephanie Manning, the Chief Government Affairs Officer for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I've known Chair Homendy for 25 years. We had the privilege of working together on Capitol Hill. She's the real deal. And the passion that you see is what she puts into her work every single day. And you're right, the gentleman that was just speaking, she's a breath of fresh air. I want to point out, we haven't had a confirmed NHTSA administrator for how many years? 5 years. Thank you, Jonathan. It was Mark Rosekind. We have not, I just want to say that again, we haven't had a confirmed NHTSA administrator for 5 years. I am so thrilled that Chair Homendy is in this role because we desperately need leadership, strong, loud leadership. I am here representing 2 million victims and survivors of drunk driving. We, MAD, is very loud on Capitol Hill right now, as Chair Homendy and many of you know, with the support of GHSA, the National Safety Council, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety, AAA, a lot of groups that we talk with weekly. We have regular calls about what we are going to do as traffic safety leaders to stem the tide and to get to zero. And there's two things that we're focused on that we feel are bold, that we need to be doing as a community. And there are other solutions as well, but I just want to say in response to Chair Homendy, as she knows, MAD is focused on fair and just enforcement to differentiate hazardous driving behavior enforcement. And I have Denise Blake here who chairs, wave Denise. Denise chairs our Equity and Traffic Safety Enforcement Committee internally at MAD. If anybody wants to talk to either of us about that, we have to protect traffic safety enforcement. We have to. So that's something we're working on quite a bit. And then secondly, a rulemaking that hopefully will pass through this reauthorization package very soon to look at technologies that manufacturers can put on cars to stop impaired driving and potentially other forms of driver behavior problems on vehicles. We know technology exists and we need it to happen now. So Chair Homendy, I just want to say thank you so much for providing the leadership that this community so desperately needs. I look forward to getting to know more of you at the conference. And from the victim's voice, the victim's perspective, we really need to have that sense of urgency, the courage, the grit, the resilience to solve this problem together as a community. Thank you so much, Chair Homendy.
Thanks, Stephanie. And thank you to all of you. Appreciate it. Have a good conference.
Thank you so much. We don't always agree, but we have to communicate. Have you been talking to my wife? No, thank you. Your comments on the safe system approach, we're very glad to hear, and you have a partner in GHSA that will continue to work with you. So our next speaker is a familiar face to GHSA, but he's joining us today in a new role at one of GHSA's newest partnerships in the automated vehicle technology. Nat Beuse, Vice President of Safety at Aurora. Nat is the Vice President at Aurora, a GHSA partner working in the automated vehicle technology industry. Aurora is delivering the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. Nat's team leads the development and implementation of Aurora's approach to safety, oversees operational, organizational, and product engineering safety, and works with industry groups and regulatory bodies to offer guidance and support the development of best practices and safety standards. Prior to joining Aurora, Nat led the safety team at Uber Advanced Technologies Group and served as the Associate Administrator for Vehicle Safety Research at NHTSA. Nat is also on the board of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. We've known Nat for a long time and are excited to hear how Aurora is continuing to advance highway safety. Please give a warm GHSA welcome to Nat Beuse.
Morning, everybody. Oh, I have to do a Mark Rosekind. Good morning, everybody. That's a little bit better. I know it's kind of hard to follow a speech that Member Homendy just gave, but I think part of what Jonathan and Russ and Pam and the whole rest of the organizing team, I think, wanted to leave you with today is inspired. At least that's the way I think about it. So when Member Homendy asked the word that resonated with you, for me, it was really that word inspired. I'm inspired by what we can do together. When I look at my past life at NHTSA, when I look at what I was doing at Uber ATG, and when I look at what I'm doing at Aurora, it's really inspiring. The lives that we touch every single day that we won't know is pretty damn inspiring, I would say. Many people are walking around today because of things that I've worked on, the things that you've worked on. That's pretty inspiring. And so what I'm going to do today is just kind of walk through how we at Aurora are approaching self-driving, particularly around safety, because it's such a critical topic. Certainly feels good to be back in person. I agree. I was joking with Jonathan earlier. I think I used this excuse just to break out a blazer because I haven't put real shoes on, I think, in almost a year and a half, and certainly haven't put on a blazer since I left NHTSA. So this is all for you folks. So maybe a little bit about Aurora if you don't know. So Aurora is a self-driving car company that was founded by some of the most brilliant minds in self-driving just a few years ago. We're not like 5 decades old or something. We're really a young company, and we're a hungry company. And what we wanted to do is really to deliver the benefits of self-driving safely, quickly, and broadly. And there's a reason why that word safely appears first. It's certainly the reason why I'm at Aurora, but it certainly speaks to kind of the ethos of the company. And so what are we working on? We're really working on what we do best, which is really technology that makes a vehicle a self-driving vehicle. We're not interested in building vehicles. We're not interested in building logistics networks. We're really just interested in building the software, the hardware, the compute stack, all of those things that go together in an integrated way with people who know how to build vehicles and deliver this promise of this technology. A lot of times you'll hear self-driving car companies talk about we're here to save lives. And certainly that is a tremendous outcome of the technology, but we don't start there. We actually have to deliver the technology first. So let me talk about a couple of the ways that we are at least doing that, or at least the way we're thinking about it. The first is with a strong team. We really build our team from a place of humility. We don't know everything, so we go out and get people who do. On my team alone, we have people that span nuclear, oil and gas, aviation, traditional automotive, and beyond. So you might think, why are you looking at oil and gas? What the heck does that have to do with automation? Well, quite simple. It actually has to do with lessons learned in other industries that we can take and apply to what we're doing. And I'll get into a few of those in a second. The other thing we kind of accepted in our own role is like not all the knowledge is inside, we'll call it the 4 walls of Aurora. And it's actually kind of not the 4 walls because we're in 8 different locations across the country and offices in Pittsburgh and California, Montana. And so we really have grown quite a bit. And so given that breadth, we really wanted to tap some outside experts. So one of the things we've done, which is we believe in industry first, is we've actually established a group of outside safety advisors. So these folks, I would say, at least the way I would describe it to my parents, is like they're like the unofficial conscience on my shoulder, telling me like, hey, Nat, have you thought about this? Sort of like, you know, when you're growing up and you kind of envision your parents telling you like, hey, should you really be doing that? That's what we have. So we have not only the power of this cross-functional team inside the building, we also have this group of experts outside. In fact, we have a meeting coming up just in a few short weeks to kind of review where we are as a company, what we're doing on safety. The other approach we take is really this comprehensive, holistic view of safety. Very similar to what member Homendy was talking about with respect to the safe system approach, except we're doing it maybe a little bit different. I would say maybe we're doing it on steroids. So one of the things that was mentioned was this notion of how did aviation get to zero? I'm not so much interested in how aviation got to zero. I'm more interested in how they stayed there. That's really the power. It's easy to get there in some ways. It's harder to stay there. It's sort of the struggle that we're in right now with traffic fatalities. A third of the fatalities have been alcohol related, probably for almost a decade and a half, if not longer, right? We're stuck. We've got to come up with new ways to do things to kind of get that number lower. In the same way, we want to stay at zero, right? We're building this technology. We want to have few fatalities. So how do we actually go about doing that? One of the ways we're doing that is something called a safety management system. So this is a technique that we sort of stole from aviation. Why invent something new if you don't have to? And so what does safety management system allow us to do? Well, it actually allows us to understand the culture of the company. How do employees feel about the safety at Aurora, right? I have a colleague here, Mufado, right? We talk about this all the time. What do the employees think about safety at Aurora? How do we measure it? How do we explain to the outside world how the companies feel about safety at Aurora? There are other things associated with that system. How do we understand the risks that we're taking on public roads every day? You need to have tools, processes, and techniques where you're actually measuring that kind of information and then feeding it back into the engineering process. That's how aviation has stayed at zero. Not because industry and government got together and said we need to do something. They developed all these techniques where they're constantly looking, constantly searching, not satisfied with the status quo. And that's where we are at Aurora. We're not satisfied with the status quo. We know we can always do better. You know, if you heard me speak before, safety is not a destination. You're never done. just like safety culture isn't a destination, you're never done. It's always a constant journey, and it's always something that you have to work at. And so you have to have things inside the company to help you measure it and build it and make it stronger time and time and time again. And we didn't stop there. So you just can't take something from another complete sector and just bop it on and hope that it works. You actually have to stitch it into the fabric of the company. So that's one thing that we've done quite effectively, both at Aurora and even previously at ATG. In fact, we did it so well, and we actually shared it so much that after the Tempe crash, we got a recommendation from the NTSB, and I forget who mentioned about using those recommendations as opportunities. We certainly did, and we turned that recommendation into an exceeded expectation, which Member Homendy will correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty rare designation that I think has not been levied on any company in the last 2 decades, and certainly not in the automotive space. And so that's how serious we are about making sure we understand how to measure risk inside the company and making sure that we have a robust safety culture. Another technique that we pulled from a completely different industry is something called a safety case framework. So this is something that most aficionados would say came out of the oil and gas industry, but has been applied kind of in different use cases. And so for us, this is really our safety roadmap. You might hear other companies talk about, we had this many disengagements, or we landed this feature. What we've done with the safety case framework is really define all of the different pieces that we're looking at in order to deliver the Aurora driver safely, quickly, and broadly. So what does that mean? That means we're looking at things like proficiency. What are all the things that we need to think through in order to say, yep, the Aurora driver has been designed to be proficient. We have another principle, fail safe. We did all that work, it's proficient, but now something went wrong. Are we prepared for what those things are? And we have 3 other principles, kind of similar things where we break down this whole notion of what does it mean to be acceptably safe on public roads? And for us, that really is how we're doing it. It's not about we have to drive some number of miles to get disengagements, or we have to kind of keep putting up, we'll call it vanity metrics. This is really what we've shared with the world, which is really this notion of take a look at our argument, take a look at our structure. We're actually engineering to those things, and we believe that's the way that we're going to get there. And the last piece I'll talk about is really around transparency and collaboration. Something that I believe certainly is very, very important when it comes to what we're talking about with self-driving. Right now, we live in a space where it's very confusing. We have all sorts of technologies on vehicles you can buy today, right? You have automatic emergency braking, that's nearly standard now, if not 100% standard. You have things like forward collision warning, you have things like lane departure, you have things called traffic jam assist, and so on and so forth. These are not the technologies that we're working on. We are really working on technologies that have to drive the way you and I drive, so to speak, and not in the terms of the speeding and the alcohol use and the belt use, but really navigating scenarios that we sort of take for granted as human drivers. We have to get the computer to do all of those things. And for us, there is a very clear differentiation between those 2 worlds. Even though for better or for worse, and I would say mostly for worse, they're sort of happening together right now all at the same time, and it gets very confusing. So we're trying to do our part in trying to clarify the difference between those 2 realms of technologies. The amount of work that you have to do for a level 2 system, let's say, these are systems you can buy today, you know, some of them allow limited hands-off, feet-off operation, is a different set of engineering challenges, and it's particularly on the human factor side that's dramatically different than when you're talking about automating a Class 8 tractor trailer or automating a vehicle for a rideshare platform. Dramatically different. The amount of engineering that we are doing is light years ahead, let's say, of what's going on in those level 2 systems. We don't get to like validate our systems on public roads and drive around a bunch of miles. That's not how we can do it. Because every time you make a change to the software, you have to go back and redo all again. Then that's really the power of the safety case framework. So for us, we're really being transparent in that those 2 worlds are different. And so we spend a lot of our time trying to educate members of the public, media, even to some extent federal officials about those 2 worlds. Because we have to tackle both at the same time, and we cannot let the fears and the challenges associated with level 2 technologies prevent us from delivering this really awesome technology that can truly revolutionize the world. I mean, it can open up things that we haven't even imagined, but we have to be transparent in the way that we're doing that, and we have to be collaborative in the way that we're doing that. So for example, one of the things we're doing in our part is not just about education. So we've taken all of the work that we've done on safety case framework. It took us months to develop that, and I mean months. We got outside experts to give us their take, people from oil and gas in particular, on how to do a safety case framework. And we did all that, and then we gave it to the world. We put it out just a few weeks ago and challenged other self-driving car companies to look at it from their own application and do the same. Same thing with safety management systems. There are tons of information available out there on safety management systems. You can go read FAA Part X, Y, and Z about what's required of aviation, what's required of operators, what's required of machinists, so on and so forth. It takes a lot of work and a lot of expertise to take that framework and apply it to self-driving at a company that's 1,500 as big as ours. You just can't do the stamp. And so we also shared that. We worked very deeply with the Automated Vehicle Safety Consortium, which is a part of SAE, to share that knowledge. So for us, we think this is really about not only sharing what we know how to do, but really trying to bring the entire industry forward, because it's not just for us, it's really for the world. And of course, we want to get there, and we will get there, but we want to make sure that we're doing our part to share the knowledge that we've learned with the broader industry so that we continue to push the industry forward on safety. So with that, I think I will stop, and certainly happy to take any questions that folks might have, because that was a lot of information to go through in a pretty short period of time. Thank you. I'm going to time who gets the mic first. All right, you win.
Thank you so much for sharing your inspiration with us and your company's goals and the way that you're approaching it. I think that's really reassuring. You mentioned about inspiration, and you mentioned about technology for which we don't even know where it's going to go yet. I was just wondering if you could share some of that inspiring, what you see in that future in that space.
Yeah, love that question. Thank you so much for asking it, because it's a part I actually don't get to talk about all that much because I'm the safety guy. There's another piece of this that really has to do with, let's say, how traditionally we've approached transportation in the United States. I think it's no secret to folks that have actually studied it that we've had let's say, a not holistic view of how we should be deploying transportation. There are food deserts, for example. There are communities that have highways that run right through them. So many countless examples of how poor planning, let's say, or poor forethought led to situations now where we have to do a lot of work to repair those communities. And so the promise of this technology, let's say in a rideshare application, is the fact that you can connect people to jobs. I remember being involved in a study back when I was at DOT, and we were looking at a community, and one of the things we saw in this community was this very high birth death rate, particularly because people didn't have access to get to hospitals, and automation was one of the things that actually could help there. We actually funded a pilot project to do that. So many examples like that. It's not, I think the image that a lot of people have is that it's, a bunch of people, business guys in particular, gals, going to dinner or going to the airport, and that's kind of the extent of the technology. You hear horror stories about how people are just gonna, I don't know, send their parents ham in 5 states away via their automated vehicle just because they can. Certainly, we have to have smart policies in order to help guide the technology, but that's not really how it's going to happen. And I think we have to be a little bit more deliberate in thinking through all of these other countless opportunities that can be available to us with the technology. On the trucking side, for example, which is our first to market, it's really about quality of life, right? A lot of people want to say it's about, the labor issue, which is certainly one that we have to pay attention to. But I actually happen to know a few truck drivers in my family, and no one really loves being away from their family for days and weeks on end. It is actually one of the most dangerous jobs out there, in case you didn't know. And so the idea that you can have this technology sort of bridge the gap in a lot of ways, allow people to come home to their families on a daily basis, I think is something very positive that, again, we don't really know how to measure it just yet, but certainly the profound impacts are very inspirational on how that can occur.
Hi, Nat. It's really good to see you again. I notice every time I see you, you keep looking younger. I'm not sure how you do that, but I'm a little concerned it's more a reflection of me getting older. But my question is, you know, when you reflect back on the wide variety of experiences that you've had in your career and the many things you've done, can you kind of go back to your time at NHTSA and maybe give us any tips or thoughts that you have on those of us in the safety community working more effectively with our federal partners?
Really appreciate the question and the compliment. I'm not sure I'm getting younger. That is for sure. My body is telling me I'm definitely not getting younger. Maybe it's the hairdo, because that's a thing. No, and in all seriousness, yeah, it's a really excellent point. Something I've thought about quite a bit, and certainly something I do now in my new role. So part of it is just this, getting together and talking through these issues. I mean, I love the way Member Homendy put it. Like, we don't all have to agree, but like, we should at least be able to talk and get to some common ground somewhere. I think a lot of times when I was at the agency, it was always, go fix this now. Like, don't you guys just go write a rulemaking and get it done? And I can give you the experience of working on rear visibility, right? Those little screens everyone has in their cars. This is not a survey about whether you like it or not, but you know, there's the screens and you put your car in reverse and you back up. That rulemaking took almost 8 years from start to finish. And I had to work on it for at least that long. And so that's a really simple technology, right? Turn the car on, put it in reverse, little screen shows up and you see what's behind you. So think of how complicated it is to do rulemaking on something like automated vehicles, let's say, or something like a level 2 driver assist systems. And I'm not defending the agency by any means. It's just sort of putting it out there that these things are complicated. I see Stephanie, I heard Stephanie talk about all the work going on with respect to alcohol technology, right? That's another one. It's measures, you're drunk or not, does something with the car. Super complicated to actually write a rulemaking around that. And I think part of what we as a community, because I put myself in this camp, is we have to figure out what to do in the interim. We always have to do those big leaps and look very far into the future and push for those things. But what are we going to do in the interim? I was mentioning to Denise from Matt earlier, we've had 8 quarters or so of increased fatalities, particularly due to alcohol and speeding and these other risky behaviors. I love the way Corporal Matthew put it, like speed racing. I never would have guessed that drag racing on public streets would become a thing during the pandemic when everybody's supposed to be locked in their house, but yet it became a thing. And so what are we doing right now? Sometimes we lose sight of the right now in search of the future. For us, like at Aurora, it really is all of that, right? If the roads are unsafe, it's actually harder for us to deploy the technology. Think about that. If we have to design a Class 8 tractor trailer to compensate for people driving by us at 3 times the speed limit, that's really, really difficult to do. Really difficult. And so for us, it's really about what can we do today? And I think sometimes we rely too much on NHTSA to solve all of these things when there's a lot of things that we can do talking with each other. You know, I look at my work on automatic emergency braking. I was very fortunate enough to work with David Zuby over at IHS to sort of get the automakers together with us in a room and agree, how do we bring that technology to the market without a rulemaking? And we did it. We actually did it. We got everybody to agree. We agreed on what the performance levels would be. It took like only 5 months, and we got everybody to agree to what the rollout was. Things like that, we also need to continue to add into the toolbox. It can't always be the rulemaking. We can't always rely on Member Homendy and NTSB to issue a recommendation. We all got to work together and get that common goal of what makes sense. And in that AEB example, there was clear agreement that this technology works, and we didn't want to wait on rulemaking to get there. And we got a bunch of like-minded people together, and we did it. That's how I've seen big moves in traffic safety happen. When you get like-minded people working together, you can really move those mountains in a very spectacular way. All right, Chuck's coming up to get me. All right, excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nat. What's clear to me in those two presentations is your passion, both of you, for highway safety. It came through, and we appreciate your partnership and your leadership. When we had a call, I guess maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, as to whether or not we were going to continue having this conference, this is what was on my mind: the partnerships, the talking, the getting together to solve this problem. I said the other day at our meeting that we're the ones who are supposed to solve this problem. Our family, our relatives are look to us to solve this problem. How could we not meet and try to solve this problem during the pandemic? So thank you so much for being here and for your partnership. So that concludes the opening general session. You probably need a break from your mask. So we are going to take a break sponsored by AAA in the exhibit hall until 10:30. Please, again, be sure to visit the booth to talk to our sponsors. And the break will be followed by our first block of workshops. All the workshops will be on your app, conducted in Plaza Ballrooms D, E, and F. And then we hope to see you for the Monday luncheon with the acclaimed author, Brad Meltzer. So thank you again, everybody. Enjoy your break.